Boredom isn't the enemy. Boredom is the battlefield. The moment you're alone with silence, no phone, no noise, no dopamine drip, that's when the weak start to panic. They scroll, they snack, they distract. You either collapse or you get forged. Most men never find out which one they are because they're terrified of stillness. That fear tells me everything I need to know about them. You've been lied to. You are told comfort makes you stronger. Entertainment keeps you sane. Constant stimulation is normal. That's weakness dressed up as culture. Boredom is the raw state of existence, and when it hits, your mind starts screaming because it has no control. That scream, that's your true level of mental strength being exposed. If boredom breaks you, life owns you. Here's the part most people can't handle. When you sit in boredom long enough, your mind starts doing something strange. Thoughts loop, language fragments, focus turns inward. It's not mystical, it's not religious, it's power. I call it speaking in tongues, not some church nonsense, but the internal language of a mind shedding its training wheels. It's your brain reprogramming itself without external input. Weak men call it uncomfortable, strong men call it evolution. Speaking in tongues is what happens when discipline replaces distraction. When your inner dialogue stops begging for pleasure and starts issuing commands. You don't need music. You don't need hype. You don't need validation. Your mind learns to operate without crutches. That's control. That's dominance. That's the moment your identity shifts from consumer to commander. Most men can't sit still for 10 minutes without checking a screen. And you think they're ready for pressure? For leadership? For war? Boredom strips away your fake personality. It shows you how undisciplined you really are. And if you survive it, if you stay seated while your brain tries to escape you, unlock a level of mental authority most people will never touch. The moment boredom shows up, the truth comes with it. No warning, no filter, just exposure. When the noise stops and nothing is demanding your attention, your nervous system tells on you. Restlessness creeps in. Fingers itch. The urge to escape becomes physical. That reaction isn't random, it's a diagnostic. It reveals how weak your internal control really is. A strong mind doesn't scramble when stimulation disappears. A weak one panics because it has nothing to hide behind. Most men think boredom is harmless. It's not. It's a stress test. When there's no entertainment, no dopamine hits, no external task telling you what to do, your mind is forced to stand on its own legs. And for most people, those legs buckle instantly. They reach for a phone. They create fake urgency. They manufacture noise. Not because they need it, but because they can't tolerate facing their own untrained mind. Here's the uncomfortable reality. If boredom makes you uncomfortable, we're not disciplined. You're conditioned. You've trained your brain to survive only when it's fed constant stimulation. Take that away and your identity starts shaking. That's why boredom feels threatening. It exposes dependency. It shows you that without external input, you don't command your attention. You beg for it. Watch how fast people fold in silence. 5 minutes alone and they're checking notifications that don't exist. 10 minutes and they're inventing tasks that don't matter. This isn't productivity. It's avoidance. Boredom forces confrontation, and most men are terrified of confronting themselves. They'd rather stay busy than be honest. A controlled man doesn't rush to fill space. He can sit in emptiness without flinching. That ability signals strength at a deep level. It means his nervous system isn't fragile. It means his sense of self doesn't depend on constant input. It means when pressure hits, he doesn't need distraction to cope. He stays present. That's rare. And rarity is power. Boredom exposes whether your mind works for you or against you. When there's nothing to do, your thoughts either spiral or stabilize. If they spiral, it means you've never trained them. You've outsourced mental regulation to screens, noise, and novelty. That works until life removes those options. Then you're exposed, no mask, no buffer. This is why boredom is avoided at all costs in modern culture. Silence reveals cracks. Stillness reveals chaos. If a man can't be alone with his thoughts, he's not ready for responsibility. Leadership doesn't come with background music. Pressure doesn't wait for you to feel entertained. Real environments don't care about your comfort. A man who collapses in boredom will collapse under stress. That's not opinion. That's pattern recognition. Boredom is low-level pressure. If you fail there, you won't survive higher stakes. The brain that needs stimulation to function will short-circuit when things get hard. It will seek escape instead of solutions. Strong men use boredom as training. They don't label it as a problem. They recognize it as a mirror. When discomfort shows up, they don't move. They observe. They let the urge to escape rise and fall without acting on it. Every time they do that, control increases. Every time they resist the impulse to distract themselves, authority over the mind sharpens. This is the part most people miss. Boredom doesn't create weakness, it reveals it. And once revealed, it gives you a choice. You can cover it up again with noise, or you can stay still long enough to fix it. The men who choose the second option separate themselves permanently. They stop being reactive. They stop being impulsive. They stop being controlled by the environment. If boredom exposes you, that's good. Exposure is information. Information is leverage, and leverage is how strength is built. Discomfort is not a side effect of growth. It is the price of admission. The moment you feel resistance, irritation, mental fatigue, or restlessness, that's not a sign to stop. It's proof you've arrived at the edge of your current capacity. Most men misread that signal. They think discomfort means something is wrong. In reality, it means something important is happening. Your brain is designed to protect you, not to make you powerful. The second you step outside what's familiar, it pulls the alarm, it creates tension, it floods you with reasons to quit. That internal pressure isn't danger, it's friction. And friction is how strength is built. No friction, no adaptation. No adaptation, no dominance. The problem is that modern men are trained to avoid discomfort at all costs. Hunger? Eat instantly. Bored? Scroll. Tired? Quit. Confuse? Distract yourself. This constant avoidance creates fragile minds that interpret any resistance as a threat. When discipline is required, they fold. Not because they're incapable, but because they've never paid the entry fee. Discomfort is the gatekeeper. It filters out the undisciplined before they ever access real power. That burning feeling when you want to move but force yourself to stay. That mental itch when you want stimulation but deny it. That heaviness when your body wants relief and you refuse to give it. Those moments are where the separation happens. Weak men negotiate. Strong men endure. Every meaningful upgrade in your life has discomfort attached to it. Physical strength comes from stress on muscle. Mental sharpness comes from sustained focus under resistance. Emotional control comes from not reacting when you feel provoked. There is no shortcut. Anyone selling comfort with results is lying or selling weakness. Here's what most people don't understand. Discomfort rewires your nervous system. When you stay present in it instead of escaping, your brain learns that pressure is survivable, then manageable, then controllable. Over time, the same stimulus that used to break you barely registers. That's not toughness. That's conditioning. That's earned. Men who chase comfort never build tolerance. Men who build tolerance don't fear discomfort. This is why disciplined individuals move differently. They're calm where others panic, focused where others scatter, still where others fidget. It's not talent, it's exposure. Repeated, intentional exposure to discomfort without escape. The urge to quit is predictable. It always arrives early and loud. It tells you this isn't necessary, that it's pointless, that you deserve relief, that voice is not intuition, it's weakness, negotiating terms. Every time you obey it, you reinforce the habit of avoidance. Every time you override it, you strengthen command. Discomfort also removes delusion. It shows you what you actually value. If you say you want control but won't tolerate unease, you're lying to yourself. Real priorities reveal themselves under strain. Discipline isn't proven when things are easy. It's proven when quitting would feel better, and you don't. The men who dominate environments are not the most emotional or the most expressive. They're the most regulated. That regulation comes from learning to sit inside discomfort without reacting. No drama, no self-talk spirals, no theatrics, just controlled exposure until the nervous system adapts. Avoiding discomfort feels smart in the short term. In the long term, it destroys leverage. You become dependent on conditions being perfect, on motivation showing up, on life cooperating. Disciplined men don't wait for alignment. They create it by operating effectively under pressure. Discomfort isn't your enemy, it's your instructor. It teaches you where you're weak, where you hesitate, where your control breaks down. And once you see that clearly, you can build exactly where it matters. Not with inspiration, with tolerance, with repetition, with refusal to escape, pay the entry fee, or stay outside watching others pass through. There is no alternative path. A mind that only works when it's stimulated is not a strong mind. It's a dependent one. If you need noise to focus, entertainment to relax, or constant input to feel stable, you are not in control. You are being managed by external forces. Real mental authority begins when you can function at a high level with nothing feeding you. No music, no screen, no reassurance, just you and your ability to command attention on demand. Most people confuse stimulation with productivity. They think being busy means being effective. It doesn't. It just means their mind can't tolerate stillness long enough to organize itself. The truth is brutal. If your concentration collapses the moment stimulation is removed, you never had concentration to begin with. You had distraction disguised as focus. Control without stimulation is rare because it requires internal structure. There's no external rhythm to lean on, no artificial energy, no mood boost. The mind has to generate its own order. That's uncomfortable at first. Thoughts wander, restlessness spikes. The urge to add noise becomes aggressive. That's the test. If you give in, you stay dependent. If you stay seated and continue operating, the mind adapts. The brain learns through exposure. When you repeatedly force it to focus without external aids, it rewires itself to sustain attention naturally. This is not theory. It's neurological conditioning. The same way muscles adapt to resistance, the mind adapts to silence. Over time, what once felt unbearable becomes neutral. Then it becomes powerful. You no longer need the environment to cooperate for you to perform. Men who lack this ability crumble under pressure because pressure strips away comfort. Meetings don't come with music. Crises don't wait for motivation. High-stakes environments are silent and demanding. If you trained your mind to require stimulation, you panic when it's gone. If you've trained it to operate without it, you become dangerous in those moments. This is why elite performers guard their attention aggressively. They don't flood it with content. They don't outsource regulation to entertainment. They practice working in silence, thinking in silence, deciding in silence. That silence becomes a weapon. It allows clarity when others feel overwhelmed. It allows precision when others rush. It allows patience when others react emotionally. The average man avoids silence because silence exposes mental disorder. Racing thoughts. Lack of direction. Impulses demanding relief. Stimulation hides that chaos. Remove it, and the truth surfaces. That's why most people never train this skill. They'd rather drown the noise than fix the system creating it. But when you commit to operating without stimulation, something shifts. Your attention sharpens. Your reactions slow down. Your internal dialogue becomes cleaner. You stop needing external energy because you built internal command. Decisions become deliberate instead of impulsive. You're no longer chasing relief. You're executing intent. This ability also changes how others perceive you. A man who doesn't fidget, doesn't rush to fill silence, and doesn't see distraction projects authority. People trust stillness. They respect composure. Silence signals confidence because it shows you're not dependent on validation or input. You're self-contained. There's also a deeper advantage. When you remove stimulation, you regain control over desire. You're no longer reacting to every impulse. You choose when to act. That separation between urge and action is power. Most men live inside reaction loops. Stimulus hits, response follows, no gap, no control. Discipline creates a gap. In that gap, you decide. Operating without stimulation doesn't make you boring. It makes you lethal. You can engage when necessary and withdraw when required. You're not hijacked by every notification, emotion, or craving. Your mind becomes a tool instead of a liability. If you can sit in silence and still think clearly, still plan, still execute, you've reached a level of self-mastery most men never touch. That's not talent. That's training. And once you have it, nothing external owns you anymore. There's a moment most men never reach because they escape too early. It happens after distraction is removed, after boredom has done its damage, after discomfort has stopped screaming and started whispering. The internal noise breaks apart. Thoughts lose their usual structure. Language becomes fragmented, sharp, instinctive. This is the point where weak minds panic and run because they think something is wrong. Nothing is wrong. This is the mind-shedding dependency and stepping into command. What people misunderstand is that internal dominance doesn't arrive as clarity at first. It arrives as disruption. Your usual mental patterns collapse because they were built on stimulation, approval, and habit. When those supports disappear, the brain searches for a new operating system. That strange internal state where thoughts feel raw, compressed, almost coded is not confusion. It's reorganization. It's the mind learning to function without permission from the outside world. This is what real control feels like before it looks impressive. No hype, no emotional surge, just a cold internal shift where the inner voice stops negotiating and starts directing. You don't think in long explanations anymore. You think in commands. Short, precise, non-negotiable. That's not mysticism, that's efficiency. That's a brain no longer wasting energy on self-soothing or justification. Most men never experience this because they interrupt the process. They reintroduce noise the second things feel unfamiliar. They mistake loss of comfort for loss of sanity. But the men who stay learn something dangerous. The mind doesn't need constant explanation to function. It needs authority. Once that authority is established internally, the noise disappears on its own. Internal dominance means your thoughts no longer drag you around. Emotions don't hijack direction. Urges don't dictate movement. The inner dialogue becomes clean because it's no longer a debate. There's no committee meeting in your head. There's a single voice that decides and the rest aligns. That's power at the source. This state changes how you move through the world. You don't rush to speak because silence doesn't threaten you. You don't over-explain because certainty doesn't need defense. You don't chase stimulation because your mind is already occupied with execution. People feel this immediately. They might not understand it, but they respond to it. Authority is recognized long before it's explained. What makes this uncomfortable is that it removes excuses. Once your inner voice is trained to issue commands, you can no longer lie to yourself. You know exactly when you're avoiding, hesitating, or betraying your standards. That level of honesty is unbearable for undisciplined men. They'd rather stay distracted than be accountable to their own mind. This internal language, short, sharp, instinctive, is not emotional. It's strategic. It doesn't motivate you. It moves you. There's no pep talk required. The order is given and action follows. This is why men who reach this state appear calm under pressure. They're not suppressing chaos. They eliminated it earlier in silence. It also creates identity shift. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who executes. That shift doesn't come from affirmations or confidence tricks. It comes from repeated moments where your mind wanted relief and you denied it. Over time, the mind learns who's in charge. Most people search for power externally: status, money, influence. They miss the foundation. Without internal dominance, external power collapses the moment pressure increases. With it, even limited resources feel sufficient. You don't need perfect conditions because your operating system is stable. This is why the process feels isolating. Few people are willing to sit long enough for the transformation to occur. Fewer still are willing to live with the consequences of that level of control. Once you have it, you can't unsee weakness. You can't tolerate disorder. You can't go back to mental chaos disguised as personality. This is not about feeling strong. It's about being unmovable. When your inner voice speaks with authority, the world adjusts. Not because you demand it, but because you no longer need it to. Silence is ruthless because it removes the costume. When entertainment, noise, and constant interaction disappear, the version of yourself you perform for the world collapses. What's left isn't flattering. It's raw. It's unfinished. And that's exactly why most men avoid it. They're not afraid of being alone. They're afraid of meeting who they actually are without distractions, doing the talking for them. Identity built on stimulation is fragile. It only exists when conditions cooperate. The confident guy who needs a crowd, the focused worker who needs music, the motivated man who needs hype. Strip those away and the persona evaporates. Silence doesn't create the breakdown, it reveals it. It exposes how much of your identity is borrowed instead of built. When boredom stretches long enough, the false layers peel off. The jokes stop landing internally. The self-image loses clarity. You start noticing how much of your personality is reaction-based. How often you respond instead of decide. That discomfort isn't a flaw in the process, it's the process working. Identity doesn't upgrade gently. It fractures first. Most people mistake this phase as losing themselves. They're wrong. They're losing the mask, the version of themselves shaped by trends, validation, and easy dopamine starts dissolving. That's terrifying if you've invested years into that image. But it's necessary. You can't build something solid on top of a performance. Silence forces you to ask questions you've been avoiding. What do you actually value when no one's watching? What do you do when there's no reward attached? Who are you when there's nothing to consume and no one to impress? These questions don't arrive politely. They press down on you. And if you don't run, they reshape you. Identity shift doesn't come from inspiration. It comes from sustained exposure to emptiness. When there's nothing to distract you, you either invent meaning or collapse into avoidance. Men who choose the first option begin operating from intention instead of impulse. They stop asking what feels good and start asking what aligns with who they're becoming. This is where real separation happens. A man who can sit in boredom without reaching for escape starts to define himself internally. He's no longer waiting for the environment to tell him who he is. His standards become internal. His direction becomes self-generated. That's the birth of authority. Silence also removes emotional theatrics. Without constant stimulation, exaggerated feelings lose fuel. Mood swings flatten out. Reactions slow down. You stop being yanked around by whatever enters your awareness. That emotional neutrality isn't emptiness, it's stability. And stability is the foundation of any identity that can withstand pressure. Most men never reach this point because they interrupt the discomfort the moment it threatens their self-image. They go back to noise, back to comfort, back to familiar habits. They preserve the old identity because it's known even if it's weak. Growth requires letting the old version die without immediately replacing it. In that gap, something uncomfortable but powerful forms. You start acting without needing to feel ready. You stop narrating your life and start executing it. Your sense of self becomes quieter but heavier, less expressive, more grounded. You don't need to tell people who you are. Your behavior handles that. This identity isn't exciting to build. It's repetitive. It's lonely. It's often boring. And that's why it works. There's no audience to impress, no feedback loop to rely on, just standards and follow through. Over time, consistency replaces personality. Discipline replaces mood. Direction replaces desire. When identity is forged this way, it doesn't fluctuate. Praise doesn't inflate it. Criticism doesn't shake it. Silence becomes familiar instead of threatening. You stop fearing boredom because boredom no longer attacks who you are. It reinforces it. Most people want to reinvent themselves without losing anything. That's fantasy. Real identity shift demands sacrifice. Comfort goes first. Stimulation follows. Validation is last. What remains is not glamorous, but it's unbreakable. When boredom no longer feels empty, you know the shift has occurred, not because you feel different, but because you operate differently. When a man masters boredom, something fundamental breaks in the way life tries to control him. The world runs on reaction. Noise, urgency, pressure, expectation. Most people live on a leash, pulled by whatever shows up next. Notifications decide their mood. Problems decide their posture. Chaos decides their pace. A man who has trained himself in boredom steps outside that system. He doesn't react on command. He responds on his own terms. Life controls people through stimulation and stress. When something unexpected happens, the untrained mind spikes. Heart rate rises. Thoughts scatter. Decisions get sloppy. That's not bad luck. That's lack of preparation. If you can't stay calm when nothing is happening, you won't stay calm when everything is happening. Mastery of boredom is rehearsal for pressure. A bored-trained mind doesn't panic when there's nothing to do, so it doesn't panic when there's too much to do. It has already learned to sit inside discomfort without movement. That ability translates directly into chaos. When others rush, you slow down. When others overreact, you observe. When others seek escape, you look for leverage. This isn't confidence. It's conditioning. Most men think pressure reveals character. It doesn't. It amplifies habits. If your habit is distraction, pressure makes you reckless. If your habit is avoidance, pressure makes you disappear. If your habit is control, pressure makes you precise. Boredom is where those habits are built quietly, without applause. When life stops controlling you, urgency loses its power. Deadlines don't scare you. Silence doesn't threaten you. Waiting doesn't frustrate you. You stop confusing movement with progress. You can pause without anxiety. That alone puts you ahead of most people because they are constantly sprinting without direction. This mastery also destroys external dependency. You don't need motivation to act. You don't need mood alignment. You don't need ideal conditions. You move because you decide to move. That independence is rare, and rarity creates authority. People sense when someone isn't being pushed around by circumstance. A man who can dominate his mind in silence becomes unpredictable in the best way. He's not emotionally reactive. He's not desperate for validation. He's not rushing to prove anything. That calm unsettles people who rely on chaos to feel important. They can't read you because you're not broadcasting your internal state. Life tries to test you constantly. Delays, boredom, repetition, uncertainty. These aren't obstacles, they're filters. They expose who needs stimulation to function and who doesn't. The man who has trained boredom walks through these tests without friction. He doesn't resist reality. He uses it. When nothing external controls your attention, nothing external controls your decisions. That's the real prize. Freedom isn't doing whatever you want. Freedom is not being forced to do what you don't choose. Most people are slaves to impulse. They act because they feel something. Trained men act because it's required. This level of control changes outcomes quietly. You don't burn energy reacting to nonsense. You don't chase every opportunity. You don't get baited into emotional battles. You conserve focus for what matters. Over time, that focus compounds. While others exhaust themselves responding to life, you build position. The irony is that mastering boredom looks unimpressive from the outside, sitting still, doing nothing, saying little. But underneath that stillness is a nervous system that doesn't flinch, a mind that doesn't beg, a man who can wait longer than anyone else. And the one who can wait always wins. Life eventually throws situations where panic would be easy and discipline is rare. When that moment comes, there's no time to train. You either have control or you don't. The man who paid the price early doesn't rise to the occasion. He stays exactly the same. Calm, focused, unmoved. When boredom no longer pushes you, life loses its leverage. And when life has no leverage over you, you stop being manageable. You stop being predictable. You stop being weak. That's not comfort. That's command. This is why elites train in isolation. This is why kings weren't raised on entertainment. Boredom forces you to confront your own mind and either tame it or be enslaved by it. When you master boredom, you master impulse. When you master impulse, you master yourself. And when you master yourself, the world starts responding differently to your presence. So don't run from boredom. Hunt it. Sit in it. Stare it down. Let it burn the weakness out of you. Because a man who can control his mind in silence is a man who cannot be controlled anywhere else. That's the standard. Rise to it or stay average and make excuses your move.